We will now call a continuation of the Ways and Means meeting from yesterday till today. Sharita, please call the roll.
Alderman Davis.
Present.
Alderman Carr.
Present.
Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
We are expecting the family to come here in moments.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Within a week's work on
Present.
Minneapolis will terminate with the funeral for George.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Minneapolis police chief come here and train.
Somebody needs a mute.
Fire officers within 24 hours of this happening.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad.
He's muted.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Sheriff Vollmer.
Present.
Alderwoman Murphy.
Beth, you need to unmute.
Present. I said present before.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad.
Jenny, there you go.
10 present.
Sharita, thank you very much. We have a quorum present. Mr. Clerk, I believe that this is a continuation, so there's no need to approve minutes from yesterday. Is that correct? Or am I incorrect?
That's correct.
All right, thank you, sir. With that, we'll hold excuse Alderman until the end of the meeting. And with that, we'll proceed. We have before us what will be from Alderman Oldenburg, amendment number 3. And I believe Alderman Clark Hubbard, you have, because this is in reference to the Affordable Housing Trust, and I believe you had someone from there to speak. Alderman Oldenburg, would you like to have them speak before or after your presentation? Or I guess we should let you present first.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
Okay, all right. All right, sir, if you would proceed with your amendment number 3.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thanks again for jumping on today so we could put accuracy to what was brought up yesterday. This is a transfer or a reduction and an increase to bolster up $1 more million in the general fund reserve that would have been there through the 1.5% salary adjustment that happens every year as a way to increase reserves. So typically $3.4 million is encompassed in the budget to go to the reserves. The mayor's office decided to make that 2.4 with putting an extra $1 million in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This cut and put back simply reverses that, keeping that $1 million heading toward the reserve account with the ability through the $64 million of COVID and CARES Act funding to replenish that $1 million and buttress it to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because $5 million of those dollars can be used in a very flexible way for affordable housing construction. So this would reinforce the $1 million, which would be a total of $6 million actually for affordable housing construction, 5 on top of the extra $1 million that goes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I spoke with Matt Moak and CDA, who will be the recipient of those funds. He didn't see any prohibition to it and agreed that it was a good idea and would be welcomed, that $5 million effectively of affordable housing construction use dollars would be used, and he would carve $1 million of that off to leverage and buttress the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I also spoke with the mayor's office and Chief of Staff Steve Conway last night. He also, well, he was a little annoyed that I was tinkering with this, just to be honest, but he agreed that you know, cash is fungible, so to speak, and that it's important and a priority of the mayor's office that $6 million be funded for affordable housing. And in addition, he raised that another $1 million they may even want another $1 million of that CDA 5 to be used. So in totality, $7 million could go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Affordable Housing Construction Services. Now that would have to be codified in a bill and an ordinance that would come before this committee. And Chief of Staff Conway informed me they were working on drafting that as well. They were going to have to draft the $64 million appropriation package anyway to come to us. The good news with the $5 million that's going to CDA from this package is that it is incredibly flexible, and it has a runway of 2022, September of 2022. The other CARES Act monies, as you know, are much less flexible. They have to be used for direct COVID reimbursement expenses, and they have a much shorter fuse that have to be spent by the end of this year. So it made sense that with this newfound money that, again, is earmarked for affordable housing, we could continue to make sure that $1 million stayed in the reserve and bring that $1 million over from the CDBG, CDA monies, and even maybe another $1 million. So that's, you know, in theory, the thought process. Also, this morning, I did speak with April Ford Griffin, who's, you know, the director of the Affordable Housing Commission. I apologize to her. I kind of had this thought on Tuesday night, and then again rushed with it this morning, and she should have been my first call as opposed to maybe Matt Moak and Jeff Conway. She spoke about just a little concern of, you know, that she has what she has to work with, and that advocates for housing and low-income housing and the unhoused, it's important that every dollar. So I think it's welcomed by her, and I'm representing that she said she's fine with it to the extent she likes that longer runway with those funds anyway, because that mirrors what the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars, because, you know, you can't be in a hurry to spend those because affordable housing deals take years to come together before the capital stack's cemented. So she liked that there was a flexibility of you know, over 2 years associated with that $1 million, again, maybe $2 that would come to the project. So with that,
Okay.
We're open to discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Alderman. We'll start, Madam Vice. Do you have any questions of the sponsor of the amendment?
I don't have any questions. I'm glad to hear that you did speak with the director, because I know that we have challenges on getting affordable housing built, and you need more time. The previous year, there was $600,000 left in affordable housing, and I'm not sure if that's a rollover, if they get to keep it or not. But if a project is not there and it's not ready to go in 1 year, it's just very hard. So I'm sure she shared all that with you, and the possibility of having more time is just so critical. And our 5-year plan that we submitted to HUD will provide flexibility for us to spend the funds, because we do talk extensively about affordable housing, and most especially homeless housing, and finding new ways to have turnkey properties for the homeless. And I know I'm talking to people right now. So that's a good idea, instead of locking something in that must be expended in just 1 year. So I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice. Alderman Vaccaro, any questions or comments of the sponsor?
I would, yeah, would the Alderman of the 16th pose question here?
Questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So you're telling me that they're going to take the money out of the reserves? They're going to take $1 million from the Affordable Trust and then fund that back from money from the reserves? Is that what? Am I hearing that right?
No, it would be almost a left pocket, right pocket
That's
trend.
just saying the curfews tonight again.
Beth, you need to mute.
I just
Beth.
got that.
Beth, could you mute?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Where's
You're
the,
like a
where's
school
the
teacher.
million, where's the $1 million coming from? You said
There
there's
was an
money
additional-
set back. I'm just asking, so you said there's money set back in payroll that goes into the reserves. And now you're saying that money will be cut instead of going into the reserves, right?
No, Alderman.
Maybe explain it better to me.
Sure. So the general fund reserve gets funded $3.4 million, which is a mechanism that Paul came up with a few years ago that makes an annual contribution for reserves. And it's effectively 1.5% of salaries across the budget. And that amounts to 3.4 million. This year, the mayor's office wanted to cut that to 2.4 million and put $1 million of that, which again would have normally gone to the reserves, into affordable housing. I'm simply reversing that with this amendment, and then replenishing that $1 million to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and maybe an additional $1 million with the COVID $64 million federal funding package that we're getting.
Okay, but there's money here, we don't know if we can use it for that, and that will be a while before we do that, right? I know that there's millions of dollars came in, and how it gets placed, we haven't decided.
Well, we do have some parameters for that dollars, and we know that if you think of those dollars in two pots, one is CDBG fund related, and those are much more flexible. And Matt Moak at CDA believes that those funds can be used to buttress the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and used for affordable housing construction, because it says it right there in the guidelines that came. So he saw no issue with it, and those funds have a longer of September 22, so they can more align themselves with an affordable housing project that the commission wanted to do.
Okay, I have no other questions.
All right, thank you. So maybe to help Tom, so I'm guessing the intent of this is to bolster up the general reserve with an extra $1 million.
Yes, sir.
Which may, so that maybe that could be floated into our capital as we try and find some extra. So the intent of this is to try and, find creative thinking ways to try and get more award capital money to us.
I would agree with that 100%. To the extent that an extra $1 million here is another $1 million that in a supplemental appropriation down the road, we can find some more capital.
All right, so just to make that clear with everyone. All right. Alderman Howard.
Tom, I'm looking at these now. I just, so you're actually in essence borrowing from the affordable housing in anticipation of the COVID funding. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're going to take $1 million from affordable housing, anticipating that we'll get money from the COVID funds. And then if that doesn't, I guess since that's sort of liquid, we don't really know how those funds can be appropriated or not. Is that true? I mean,
well, we do know with the CDBG federal funds. So the COVID relief package came in really two buckets. So the CDBG dollars, and then also the CARES Act dollars. The CARES Act dollars have much stricter, much more stringent strings attached to those dollars. The CDBG money does not. And Matt Moak, the director of CDA, believes absolutely that 5 million of the, I think the total 17 that's coming over to CDA, we can isolate $1 million, maybe $2 million, to again align directly with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars.
so taking this out, does it, cause any problems with being in compliance with our federal guidelines for CDBG and putting these in the general revenue?
No, they wouldn't be in they wouldn't be in general revenue. They would be isolated to the Affordable Housing Commission's budget. So, and
so they'd just be
correct. Matt Moak didn't believe that there would be any non-compliance associated with those dollars with this idea.
Okay, I think that's good. And the only other question I have, I was trying to look these up, and I don't know that all the page numbers are on here, but I'll figure it out. It's okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Thank
Tamika?
you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I hate that I had to leave, so I didn't get to catch a lot of the things that were said, but I guess maybe I have some concerns about how monies are being moved. I guess some people are being privy to certain conversations and other people aren't, just in discussion, and we had some we need to have better conversations on how a lot of the COVID money would move, and then when you see that money may be possibly being moved from the Affordable Housing Commission, I guess I have some concerns about that. I'm glad that you all took a step back and talked to April Ford Griffin about that. But when things like that happen, and it appears that there are conversations being had, and it's not being brought to communities, and specifically people who have the highest concentration of affordable housing, then it makes you wonder what other conversations are being had outside of the majority of us. So I just have some concerns about it. It appears to me that things are pretty fast, and everybody is not being made privy to really what's going on and how money is being suggested that it be moved. So I would just caution us on doing stuff like that. I get it that we definitely need some extra money in the reserves, and hopefully that money will come back to us for war capital. But I just think that when decisions like this are being made, then, you know, whatever those sidebar conversations that are being had, it needs to be brought to everybody prior to us having that amendment before us. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Murphy. Beth, you need to unmute now.
There, no questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman Spencer has not joined us yet. I don't see her. I believe she's still in another committee hearing. Alderman Muhammad, any questions or comments of the sponsor? Alderman Muhammad, you need to unmute.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No worries.
Alderman, so you and the director spoke about this already, right?
You're talking about to myself or Alderman Oldenburg?
Alderman Oldenburg.
Okay, Thomas.
Ms. Griffin, the director of the Affordable Housing Commission? Yes, we spoke this morning. Yes, sir.
And she said she had no reservations or concerns with this.
Well, initially, yeah, we had to kind of talk through it, but the upshot of the conversation as it ended was that she was fine with it.
Okay. I just hope that we're not going to use this as a precedent to continue to, you know, whenever we're in a budget shortfall, that we take money from something as crucial as Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I wish I was a part of I wish we were all part of conversations early on as this began. But that's all I have. Thank you, Alderman. No questions, Mr. Chairman.
That's a point well taken, Alderman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Pam Boyd, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. After I listened and read, I understood it more. So I do understand that we're in a critical situation, and so we're trying to move dollars to try to help leverage what we can. So I have no questions right now.
All right, thank you very much. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard?
Thank you, no questions.
All right. I believe, so, you know, again, the intent of this is to borrow money, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and but we have a guaranteed backup plan for paying back Paul, or Peter, I'm sorry. And so it's, you know, and the whole intent again is to put money into, to try and get war capital money into our wards. So this is one process of the 5 million we're looking for to add 1 million, make, you know, that lowers that amount to 4 million. And maybe if the Treasurer's Department comes through with that 5, this might bolster it to 6 million that we could get into the war capital. So I understand the intent. Alderman Clark Hubbard is your guest online from the Affordable Housing Trust?
If they're not, I think because he spoke with April Ford Griffin and some other people, I think they were okay with it.
Okay, so they've done. If it would, and maybe to alleviate fears and things, Tom, maybe we could, I don't know if we need to have another meeting and have April Ford speak to us, or maybe an email or a letter stating her position on this to us as a board, as a committee. So we would all, feel, would that alleviate fears and things with the members of the committee? Anyone have any input on that?
We can always amend it on the floor.
That's fine.
So it doesn't matter.
Having worked with her before, she's a wonderful person. Her word is her bond, and I believe that if she's good with this, then we should all feel comfortable with it. I just didn't know if some of you folks wanted that in writing or not. If that's the intent, we can request that. If there's no
I
other,
would appreciate having that in writing. I would appreciate having that in writing.
all right, we'll make a request.
Thank you.
Mr. Oldenburg, if you'd like to draft a letter and we'll send it as a committee.
I will to her and make sure that I didn't misrepresent anything in the conversation we had.
I would feel that's best. As a committee, do you feel, would you like to hold a vote on this until we have that letter in your hands, or would we like to move forward with voting on the amendment? I'm just trying to get some input.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
we just
Madam
heard
Vice.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard say that a member of that commission has spoken with with April Ford, and they are now comfortable based on the concern that they had. And we also heard Alderman Oldenburg say that he has spoken with her. But what I'd like to just to have on record, if we could ask Matt Moak to send us all the emails again that they started sending us in April, asking us for our input on the COVID money, and also the outlines and categories that they were suggesting funding be put and how much. Because we've received about 3 from them.
Okay.
And if we could get all that information to look at again. And it's just for reference for the future. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And Paul, since we have you here, this all seems, as a budget director, this is all workable and possible as far as,
Yeah, I believe it will be. It'll be
Okay.
your call.
Since we have you here, always appreciate your professional input. All right. With that, we can proceed, if we feel comfortable, proceed with I'll entertain a motion. Oops, somebody's entertain a motion for Amendment 3.
Sure. I move that we vote Amendment 3, the amendment in front of us.
Second.
All right. With that, Sharita, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, Chairman, who was that second that?
Alderwoman Howard.
Okay.
Alderman Howard. Thank you.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Pass.
Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Vollmer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
and Alderwoman Spencer. 10 aye votes.
With that, we've approved the motion to add Amendment 3 to the Budget Bill number 1. I thank you very much for your presentation, Alderman Oldenburg. We'll take up next will be Amendment number 4, presented by Alderman Muhammad. We all have that on in front of us. All right. If you'd like to proceed, Alderman Muhammad, with your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, the amendment is simple. It is a transfer of $5 million from our reserves to fund our ward capital account. We talked about this yesterday, and I know we all have mixed emotions and mixed feelings about it. However, it is critical and necessary to pass a budget that includes ward capital. Ward capital, in which we are utilized and depend on for various needs in our wards and throughout our neighborhoods. I can tell you my community cannot survive on just $100,000 St. Louis workers. And I would imagine that is the same for most North St. Louis city wards and some South City wards. We have to pass a budget that includes ward capital. And that's why I'm bringing this back up. So I would ask for favorable consideration on passing this amendment and including ward capital in our budget. Again, we will get the $5 million from the treasurer's parking division funds. There's no question about that, right? Some politics is being played with the chairwoman of engrossment rules and credentials and the alderman who sponsored the bill. That's exactly what's going on. But she cannot hold up this. We're going to get $5 million from the parking division, and we need to use that $5 million where it's needed the most. And right now, as aldermen, we need it. So I'm asking for you all to vote yes for this amendment so we can include this in our budget and send to ENA. This is necessary. I know that Director Paine has some reservations because of the pandemic that we are in, and he wants to make sure that we are healthy as it relates to our reserve account, and I get that. But the needs of my community is a little bit more important to me than our credit rating or where we sit financially as it relates to our reserves. So I am asking for your favorable consideration for amendment number 4.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll open it up to the committee. Alderwoman Davis, any questions, comments?
I'd like to ask our budget director a question, please.
Certainly.
Mr. Paine, have you looked at this again to determine what you can find to budget for ward improvements?
Yeah, let me just brief you where we're at right now, because as I mentioned yesterday, I was going over the latest revenue estimates, and so we're because the month of May just ended, and so when the month ends, we take in all that information. What I'm seeing right now is the gap for the current fiscal year is getting smaller, but the gap for the next fiscal year is getting bigger, and it's because some of the revenues are expected to decline are basically that's bleeding into the next fiscal year, and so I've been thinking about this since yesterday, and I can't, I can't speak for each individual members of ENA, but I do know that in the past ENA has been willing to work with the Ways and Means Committee to find ways of trying to address the issues that come up within Ways and Means. And that might not be everything that's always asked for, but in a way that's responsive to what comes up in committee. I think, quite frankly, I'm not quite sure where we're going to end up yet because of the revised revenues, and I'm working on those as we speak. But I would think that ENA will take into consideration whatever the committee recommends, and if it's not able to accommodate address at some level whatever the committee comes up with. But again, I can't make a conclusion any way or the other depending on, because we're still going through the revised revenue estimates. But again, I think it's going to be a combination of this year's revenue being gap being smaller, but next year's revenue gap being larger. And I got to work through the numbers to come up to what we can do to accommodate the items that have been identified, so that we end up with a balanced budget by the end of June.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's why I did say that we needed to look at whatever we can get now, however minimal that might be, that's what we hold to now, and come back and revisit this when our numbers are more sure, and maybe even the economy would have turned around a little bit. It's not going to turn around a lot, we know that, but a little bit, then we could revisit this. I know that most of us, I know in my case, things that I have allocated money for this past budget year and previous budget year have not been completed yet. So my community is still going to see some improvements going on because they've got to start completing some of these items. But we will have some emergencies that will take place, and we should be in a position to try to handle some of those. So, but I'm not in favor of totally putting us in jeopardy. I say we try to figure something out that is, you know, a halfway point that we can live with for the next for the next 4 to 6 months, and then we revisit this and see where we are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice. All right, Alderman Vaccaro.
You know my feelings. You know what the voters voted for. But I will say that that money is coming over. It's already out of engrossments. It's been engrossed. I watched the meeting, so we know the 5 million's coming over. Now we know there's even an additional $1 million going in, which you just mentioned. So you said, well, maybe we could even do 6 million in ward capital. What I still say is we put the 5 million in like this, send it to E&A, so at least we have something to negotiate, because they may say, well, if we do this, this, and this, and you know we've done that, and that's how we do it, and that's what it's about, negotiation. We send this over, let them come up with a plan to get ward capital back. I have a big issue with this, and you know where I'm at, and we need to support sending this over to E&A. Let them work on it. Let them come back with a thought as to how they can put ward capital in this budget. To just send this over and say, gee, we're fine with no ward capital is absolutely wrong. And I just think this is absolutely goes against the voters. Everybody wants to keep saying, well, the voters voted for the ward reduction. We can't change what the voters say, but yet we're willing to go against the voters on what we feel like. And at that, you know, I'm just going to listen, but I definitely feel this should be put in, and I believe it should go over to Ways and Means, the E&A, and maybe they'll come up with another solution, but it is important. It is absolutely important that we can go back to our constituents and say that we at least fought for them to get this put in for their LED lights and their streets, their sidewalks. And again, I don't even have enough to do matching funds to be able to get my park stuff done. So I'm just going to listen. You know where I'm at. I'd really be disappointed if we do not send this over to E&A so they come up with a better idea.
All right, thank you very much. And I think to piggyback on Joe, what we have with this amendment today and with what, you know, has been just passed before this, it shows that we're willing to think outside the box a little more, and to show E&A that, you know, we'll try and find some ways if they can find some ways, you know, other than just doing a flat ask. Sometimes you have to you know, and I think this is, you know, with what's, you know, this happened before with amendment number 3. I agree with you. You know, we all want the money, but I think we have to show the board that we're willing to not just sit there and ask, but that we're willing to put some thought into it too. I think we've done that. So we'll proceed. Thank you very much, sir. Alderwoman Howard.
I agree with the Alderwoman from the 19th. I think that we need to bolster our reserves at this point. I mean, we haven't reached the apex of this pandemic, along with the unrest. I think that, you know, we would be wise to hold off, you know, as she said, many of us have works that haven't been completed that have, you know, we've funded 2 years ago. So there will be things done. However, I'm very concerned about the fact of depleting the city's reserve funds at this point when there's so many unknowns. And I think that our constituency will be understanding, because I think they're probably suffering some of the same issues that the city is. You know, we have people that have been out of work, and I think that if we just go willy-nilly and don't take this seriously, keeping our reserves and holding our powder, I think that we look a little foolish and a little like we don't care about the future of our city. And I think that's, you know, north, south, east, west. I think we need to keep the future of our city and our children's interest in the forefront as we move forward, just as we would with our own home finances. You know, most of us are not going out spending money willy-nilly, buying new cars, new houses, or whatever. I think we need to be prudent and look at the long term here. If this isn't as bad as it's anticipated, you know, we can always spend money at a later date. We don't have to have it appropriated right now. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Of course, I am definitely in support of us getting more capital back. However, we have to do it. But I guess I am concerned. I know that I think it was Alderwoman Howard had requested some information from the budget director regarding other funds or pots of money that are available, maybe from the treasurer's office. And is that something he can speak to? Are those funds discretionary funds, or is there like more money somewhere where we won't have to exhaust our reserves?
Go ahead, Paul.
Is that, I'm thinking you're referencing the $5 million that you have been talking about, right?
No, there was some information that was requested. I think the email came from Alderwoman Howard, and you gave us, it was a breakdown of the different pots of money. I guess it was from the treasurer's office or what they had in reserves. You sent it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I don't recall sending.
That was me that requested it, and you sent us the breakdown of all those funds from various sales tax allocations for all departments. And you showed us their expenditures and what was left over. And I only saw a small pittance that we might be able to deal with. And they still have 30 days to expand.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just to give you an idea too, also, when you do this, like I mentioned, it's a balancing act, because you've got a deficit projected this year, deficit projected next year, and you're trying to balance between the two. So when you're projecting for this year, you have to take into account the shortfall. And if one of those funds falls short and there's no other backing, the general fund has to then adjust, in that instance, next year's budget. So and that's a process I'm going through right now, just revising the revenue. So we do look at those things, but it's not like there's a bunch of untapped funds there that, except for the ones that we were talking about yesterday, that would be available to address that.
So have you looked at anything where we may be able to get a lesser amount of money? Like, you know, everyone keeps saying that maybe we can get some and then we can revisit it. Have you found anything anywhere in looking at where other monies may be?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's almost I'm trying to grab a moving target, because what I'm trying to get a handle on is on the revenues itself. I think again, what I'm seeing right now is that some of the revenues for this fiscal year are coming in a bit higher than the revised estimate for this fiscal year, but the damage is sort of bleeding into next fiscal year, and so unfortunately I'm not seeing that balance yet. So remember when I talked about those special funds and where you end up, that affects both this year as well as next year, because if you, for instance, let's say the ward accounts, we always adjust if there's a negative beginning balance, right? Well, if sales tax aren't quite as far down, then you won't have a biggest negative balance. So that's a possibility that we could look at in this year's revenue. But then if sales tax projections for next year are lower, then we also have to adjust on that end as well. So I'm not in a position today to say what that end result is, although again, I'm going through those as we speak. But we're trying to uncover any rock we've got to come up with a fund so that we can end up with a reasonable estimate by the end of June. But I guess the as was stated earlier, there was so much uncertainty here that you don't want to overcommit until you really know what's come in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just hope that we definitely can find those monies. It's unfortunate that, the people that I represent, they don't care too much about the city's credit rating. I mean, so that's not an issue for them and what our reserves look like. They just have needs that need to be met. And I just feel that we should go above and beyond and try to make sure that we receive more capital. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Murphy.
Yes, Chairman, I guess my feelings are the same as they were yesterday. I think we all have to tighten our belts.
Yeah, what's up?
And my concern, I guess, is more for the,
I got a second here.
someone's talking.
Somebody needs to mute, please. All right, go ahead, Beth.
My concern is more for the city as a whole right now. And perhaps if some, like emergency things that come up that some of these wards need, perhaps some of us could lend somebody money. I have done it twice in the short time I've been there. And I would, if I can, I would do it again. And I know there's some wards are sitting on a lot of money. Perhaps they could help some of the wards if they need something that has to be done. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Spencer, I believe, is still absent. Anyone? Okay, we'll move to Alderman Muhammad. You are speaking, so we'll pass on you. Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Paul Paine, could you just check me on these numbers? I'm going from your overview presentation you gave on the budget, which shows the reserve funds, this kind of graph. I think it's page 21 that you sent.
Right.
And it had reserves for coming into this fiscal year right at 42.8 million, which is what the number we've been referencing. And then the jump to 46.2 would be where the reserves would be at, assuming the contribution is made from the 1.5% of salaries. And the drop is really just a quick bridge of the earnings tax, correct, down to 26.
Yeah, that's the estimate for the deferred earnings. Now all that would assume that we successfully manage this year's gap so that we somehow break even.
Right.
That
So
drop.
then, assuming the projection is that 46.2, and we're talking about adding another 5 million potentially to that, we're at 51.2 million over what, a $495 million general fund budget.
Right.
495, 51.2 divided by 495. So that puts us right at about a 10.3, 10.4% of reserve to general fund ratio, which is right where you've been desperately clawing to try to get the budget to over the last 11 years, I think.
That's one way of putting it, yeah.
And that's about best practices, right? And most municipalities even try to have even more dry powder than that on hand. And, what I will say, and I appreciate the alderman from the 21st ward and the alderman from the 23rd in terms of ward capital. I mean, I don't know if there's a way, to compromise after the dust has settled on some level of reserves being put toward capital. I think you guys know my feelings on save for a rainy day and all, but in particular the alderwoman from the 5th, I understand and understand those sensitivities associated with, wanting to make sure capital improvement projects get done in all neighborhoods. I do. I just feel that we finally have gotten to a 10%, which is a fiscally prudent wedge right now between us and a bottom we don't see in the economy. So I would have to just agree with the alderwoman Marlene Davis on let's wait and see. I think we can still fix some ward capital dollars in a supplemental appropriation potentially, Paul, right? I mean, before the budget gets finalized. or after the budget's even finalized, right? There could be a supplemental appropriation from the reserves to ward capital account. Okay. That would be how I would like to proceed, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Alderman Pam Boyd.
I have no questions.
Okay. And Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Paul, was there an email out or a notice yesterday about the, I guess our credit rating is staying A+, but with a negative response, S&P or?
Yeah, that was S&P. They basically, they have received the same reports that you all have in terms of what we're planning on budget and all. They do have the concerns as well about the outlook for next year in terms of the pressures it's going to put on revenues. So what they did is they left our basic underlying rating alone, but what they did, but when they issued that rating, they said they revised the outlook from stable, which would be, okay, we don't see any particular need to revise, to negative, which means there is the potential, should things continue down a path and should we not respond as well, to downgrade. And that's what they do when they look at those things. So one of their important points on that was that our ability to manage any shortfalls in revenues. And I, as I mentioned when I presented the budget back then, it's not so much saying, hey, we have the actual numbers correct, or we, well, because nobody knows that. I mean, there's so much uncertainty here. You're not going to know, but you're trying to just be having a reasonable estimate and be prepared with changes that you might have to make should it go further south. So I think what they're saying is that, okay, we keep you as is, but knowing what the economy is and what the challenges are, our outlook's negative, and that it could go down if we don't are not able to successfully manage this, but it could go back up to stable if we are able to show that we can manage this outlook.
Okay, and then I'm guessing the reserves are the most important part of that S&P?
They have that's been one of the ones that they actually hit us on a number of years back. So we've gotten credit to some extent for the improving performance over the last couple of years, and the decision to build up the reserves, because that's basically it had gotten significantly low in the last following the Great Recession. It really had gotten significantly lower, and that was a major concern with them.
Okay, and what when we go to this subpar rating, if that would happen, our bonds, or what's the jeopardy?
Well, right now it's with S&P, which is the one they issued, was A+, and that again, it increases the cost of borrowing when you lose your credit rating agency. When you lose your credit rating at that level, Moody's and Fitch also will be reviewing, but they all basically state the same thing. And it's basically I mean, there are certain things you're not going to be able to change necessarily. I mean, the outlook, the city in general, the demographic makeup, the challenges we have regarding that, but how you manage those challenges and how you address the budget and such, they look at that considerably, and I think that's one of the things that affects our bond rating as well, and ultimately, and then which in turn affects our ability to borrow and how much we pay when we borrow and such. And it's also just good management practice. It's a good thing to get these an outside entity looking at the city and saying, this is how we look at you and how you're doing in terms of managing on a fiscal basis.
So the long-term danger, I guess, is higher borrowing rates, maybe not being able to borrow the amounts we need, and endangering things in the long run, a year from now.
Yeah, it makes things more difficult to borrow and more expensive to borrow, because basically you have to be able to explain that you can manage crises in the future.
And this, I guess, would my natural inclination is this puts future ward capital money in deeper jeopardy.
Well, I think in terms of ward cap, What you got to be concerned about is, and I'm going to be looking at this as well, is over the longer term as well. How we go about bridging the gap. I mean, you can do, obviously this year requires some one-time things that we're going to have to do, but it also means on a recurring basis, we have to ensure that we're not just putting off until tomorrow something that we're going to have to face. Because you also have to have in mind, what is FY22 going to look like? Are the pensions going to take a hit next year? Those type of things you got to keep in mind, and so that whatever approach we take is somewhat balanced between the one-time things that we need to do, as well as some of the changes in our cost structure and expenditures, so that we can manage this as we go through the next number of years.
Okay. And it seems like every million we find, I guess, rough numbers is about 36,000 per ward. Million divided by 28, like 35.7. So, yeah, you know, it's here and there. All right. I'm just trying to get, you know, what we're trying to present to I guess, and I know we're all concerned about our wards, but we should also, as a whole, have some concern for the future when we look at the city's bond ratings and borrowing money and what we're going to do. You don't want to use it all up today and have nothing at all in the future. You know, that concerns me greatly. And I understand, and I hope the committee understands, anything we pass as amendments, these are simply requests going back to the E&A. They can come back and say, nice amendment, but this is all you're going to get. So as a committee, what we want to show maybe is, do we want to, if we're finding an additional $1 million through these affordable housing trust, as Tom put it, pocket switch, you know, are we still asking for 5? Would you want to amend this to make this 4 or 3? Show some compassion and reason on our part to show them we're willing to work, or are we stuck in this $5 million before we proceed with the amendment? To, you know, how the committee feels about that. Do we want to, I know we're all, I'm keeping track of major concern about individual wards. There's major concerns about overall long-term effects on the city, which will be our wards. We have to keep that open also. So I'm just, before we proceed with a vote on this, if we're stuck on the $5 million, if we found them $1 million, do we want to reduce this? Do we want to stick in this and just take the vote? I'm open to, at this point, just raising hands if people have any comments on that. And I don't see any comments. I knew there'd be one. Okay, go ahead, Joseph.
I have no issue if John wants to drop this to 4, if it's going to change the vote.
Well, I can't guarantee that, but I'm talking about what we're presenting to send this budget back. You know, we do have the treasurer's money. Apparently, the treasurer's money will be there. And Paul, if I can, the treasurer's money legally, when does that become? You know, or when is it available, or when we know it's, you know, it's been? I guess that's still up to us to pass the board bill. It's been engrossed.
Did that have an emergency clause on it?
I didn't.
I believe it. I believe it has an emergency clause.
So that's immediate.
And although I would have to ask Jeffrey, I would honestly believe it probably should be third read and final passed this Friday.
Okay.
But I can call Jeffrey and ask him real quick.
All right. I
can respond to that, Matt, Mr. Chair.
We just proceed.
We just passed that out of engrossment. Yes, it does have an emergency clause.
All right. So it could be passed out on the floor, and the mayor could sign it Friday afternoon or Monday morning.
Right.
So, you know, that's maybe what we're looking for. I want to know how the committee feels about, do you want to hold this vote? Do you want to wait till Monday after this is done that way?
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Respectfully, I request the vote.
Okay. Well, we have your comment there. I'm just keeping this open for questions right now and comments.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Vice.
I hope that everyone was listening to the things that Paul said, because I was going to bring them up if he didn't.
Okay.
Everything you do affects everything else. And when he talked about the pension funds and all of that, it is a rippling effect, and you can end up in a deep hole that you can't get out of. And we all experienced that when the mistakes were made to use pension funds some years ago, and then you had to borrow money to pay it back, and it was just terrible. So I would ask for consideration to lower the amount. It puts us in a more fiscal posture of understanding, and I think that's critical. And I know you guys get tired of me trying to be so practical, but I don't know how to do it any other way. I served on 3 different boards as the president of billion-dollar entities, and all these things have to be considered. And I just know that I want to be as responsible as possible, because there's going to be another day, and you have to be prepared. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Joe, can I add something to that?
Yes, you may, Alderman. Go ahead.
You know, here's the other thing, though. If you listen to what Paul said, this year, next year might be the same thing. The year after might be the same thing. That even though this is a one-time thing each year, we can't let this become easy pickings. And again, it was a public vote. And I think we betrayed the trust of the public when we don't do this. What I would say is, let's try the $5 million.
Out of the reserve.
Wait a minute, I can't.
Someone needs to mute, please.
So I say we would vote on the 5 million. Hopefully it passes. If it doesn't pass, then I can quickly do another amendment to drop it. But I would hope we can pass it at 5. Let E&A come back. I'm sorry, I didn't talk when you were talking, did I?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was muted. I was talking to
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking me something. I would prefer we take the vote for the 5, send it over to E&A. We know there's $6 million more now going into the reserves. I don't think we're asking a lot. And next year, you know, again, if they choose again, how many years are we going to go, and how far are we going to let potholes and streets? You know, and again, my neighborhood wants these LED lights, and even though, yes, there's work that should have been done last year, to say, oh, gee, well, that's okay because we're going to see work. The voters voted on this, and everybody keeps reminding me, even though I think not bringing back up the reduction of the board, which I think is a big mistake, and there'll be buyer's remorse. We keep saying, oh, the voters voted on it. The voters voted on it. We can't change it. Now we're going to say, well, the voters voted on it, but who cares? And I will just keep this, you know, because I'm not going to be on this board that much longer anyway. But I will say this: good luck trying to pass any other bond issue or anything if you take this money and move it away from the voters, knowing they voted on it.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Any further comment before we, Alderman Murphy?
Yes, I have a question for Paul. Would you feel any better if the amount, would you feel any more secure if the amount was a little lower, like from 5 to 4?
Yeah, I think my thinking is that the board of E&A is willing to work with this has shown in the past willingness to work with the Ways and Means Committee on its concerns to the extent that it's affordable. At this point, I just can't work through all of that numbers today to tell you where we're going to end up, such when we get it back to E&A and then they send it back to you all, what level of funding that might be and what is reasonable. I do know that there's sort of, and everyone has talked about trying to get, it's easy to talk about the capital improvements being a certain need because everyone sees that intangible. But when you talk about reserve, it's intangible. So people don't say, what's the value of that? But I can tell you, having going back to the last recession, when we spent down our fund balance, we were going to be at a point where you weren't going to have enough monies for operations, let alone capital. And that's what you've got to be on guard against. And so there is a reason why we have those. It's not just for credit purposes. It's actually because it protects you from that time when you won't be able to cut the grass or pick up trash and things like that. I mean, had we had another year like we did in that last recession year, we would not have had enough cash balance to cover that size of a deficit. So that's how low it got, and so that's why it's important to maintain those reserves.
Okay,
right.
so I guess the onus falls on us to explain that the importance of that reserve to our constituency if we end up getting that, not getting very much or nothing at all. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, and I guess and I can speak, seeing what just happened as not knowing what's going to happen with this curfew. Bars and restaurants an hour closing, stores are closing at 8. We don't. This is indefinite as far as what's going to happen with the unrest. So, that's hitting sales tax, that's hitting earnings tax, that's hitting everything as we're looking at this. So, I appreciate everyone's input. And what we did, and what I'm going to do, we'll take this vote, and I would like to, Paul, I know we have to get, if I hold another meeting next Tuesday, usually that should be more than enough time for the things to get back. I don't have any other amendments, but I want to have some discussions with the mayor's office and some other people about this before we send this out. Tuesday should be fine as far as a date getting it back. Where you feel as far as time wise, that's June.
You're asking me that question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Paul. Yes.
Well, let me see. You still need 3 Fridays.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so maybe we'll do it. Okay, if that's the case, then we only have. I don't have a paper calendar anymore. It's on my phone.
Well, you've got this Friday is the 5th, and then you only have 3 Fridays.
All right. Okay. Well, if Terry, Mr. Clerk, are there any meetings scheduled for tomorrow that I need to work around?
Yes, I think so. I think it's 3 of them.
Okay, what time frames do we have, Sharita?
I know there's streets.
So, Mr. Chairman, are we holding the amendment?
No, I don't feel a hold amendment. I will still take the vote. I want to, in case this, not knowing how it's going to go, in case it does fail, I want to get a feel for if there's a dollar amount that might work. I want to put a request in and put some calls out and around. I'm happy to, I'm just trying to see what time I can schedule a meeting tomorrow in case, and I don't know, John, if this does fail, I'll make another attempt at it with maybe a dollar amount. I like to send something to them, letting them know, that if that's possible. I don't know. I know I want to have one more meeting before we send this back to the mayor's office. And tomorrow will be the only day we can do that with enough Fridays to get this passed out. So is there a time, Sharita, that works tomorrow for us to have a?
We have transportation is at 10 o'clock, health and human services at 11 o'clock, and then streets is at 1. So.
Okay, because I don't see this being a long meeting. So if we can schedule Ways and Means for 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I am fine with dropping 5 million to 4 million. As well.
Okay.
But they, there's no,
excuse me, hold on. Okay, and I don't know the rules if we need to have to make an amendment to change the amendment. Is Terry still with us?
I would think you would have to take a vote up or down and then offer another amendment at a different amount.
Well,
I think
actually, okay, so hold off 1 second. The easiest way might be, would you, John, if you would withdraw this amendment, which would be amendment number 4, and you would make amendment number 5, that would be the same request at 4 million, I believe would be the way to do it. In other words, withdraw this amendment and just make a new amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to withdraw amendment number 4.
Okay, who, and someone second, we need them to withdraw their second.
I would guess I was a second. I don't even know if you got a second.
Okay, so With that, Amendment 4 has been tabled and removed. Alderman Muhammad, you're welcome to introduce Amendment number 5.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would like to introduce amendment number 5 to board bill number 1.
Okay, and that, due to the constraints of this, the amendment is not before us, but I believe in Zoom meetings, we can say that this is the same as Amendment 4, but with a dollar amount change from 0 to 5 to 0 to 4 million.
Yes.
With that, I will, instead of going around, I don't know if we need individual discussion on this. If anyone has, please raise your hand if they'd like to speak to this reduction. I see a lot of head shakes no. All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to vote on amendment number 5.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to vote on amendment number 5 to board bill number 1.
Second.
We have a second. All right. Oh, Sharita, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg,
No.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Vollmer.
No.
Aye votes and 2 no votes.
Okay, with that, we've passed out amendment number 5. To amend board bill number 1. I will, don't know if we have any more input. I will still call a meeting tomorrow for 2 o'clock. I want to just finalize this before we send this over. And with that, is there any further discussion, questions, or comments on today's meeting? John, okay. With that, I will excuse Alderwoman Spencer for, she did send me an email saying she was unable to make today's meeting. And with that, I appreciate it. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second. All right,
Second.
previous roll.
That
Previous
sounds
row.
good.
All right. With that, thank you all for your time and effort today. You also, Mr. Paine. And we'll see everyone tomorrow at 2 o'clock, which should be hopefully a quick meeting. Thank you very much.